So this is Dave from Blackbird again, and we are back on the older Ultra Classic that we're putting a 6-speed in. I'll show you a 6-speed gear set in a minute. What we're going to be doing is pulling this neutral wire off. That just clips right on that. That's your neutral safety switch. We're going to tuck it back out of the way. We're going to start pulling this top off. We'll have to get all the shifting forks out so that we can get that out. What we're doing is stripping down this side right now. The primary is going to have to come off. We have to get to the sprocket, the belt sprocket, pulley, whatever you want to call it. We've got to pull this we're going to pull this cover off, pull this off, pull the front off, get the front loose. Then we got to get the shifting forks out so we can pull it all out. Now, let's see. We got 2 front bolts out. There's 3 more. 1, 2, 3. Let me grab a 1/4-inch drive ratchet. Hopefully these don't give me too much of a problem. I should have grabbed a shorter Allen, but you never know if you're gonna have to get at an angle to get to something in here, so I use these ball ends. We'll probably go ahead and pull the starter bolts as well while we're on this side. So the top's off. Now this top will be reused with this transmission. And we're gonna be down to these 4 1/2-inch. I have to get to that one from the other side. Let me get a socket and a ratchet together for that. So we're gonna break all these loose. I don't want to put any more pressure on any of these than I have to. Jump to the other side. See if I can get on that one from here. Well, just barely. Just barely. It's right up against this shifting arm here, if you can see my hand. And we got her. Let's hope this back one, yeah, it's good, looks good. Now this is called a shifting drum. This has all these, we went over this in the other video, but in case somebody hasn't seen it, all these grooves in here are what move the shifting forks back and forth to move the gears back and forth to take them in and out. And what we're gonna do is we just lift up on this, that unhooks it from there, and the whole shifting drum is gonna come out in your hands like that. Set that in the box. Now, there's a shaft that goes through all these, and the only way to get that shaft out is this has to come off. And it should come through this plate so we can work this shaft out, and then we can pull the shifting forks out of it. So I'm gonna move the camera back a little bit so I can get in here, and we'll start on the front of this. Now, I'm gonna try to not get in your way too much here. Now, if I was someone else doing this, I've done so many transmissions, so I know that where these bolts go back. If I were you, I would take a piece of cardboard, punch holes in it, the exact shape of what you're doing, and take all these out in order and put them in those holes. And that way you've got the order they came out, because some of them are going to be longer than others. This right here is what houses your clutch cable and your throwout bearing. This will all stay the same, so we shouldn't have to change any of this out. We should be able to just drop the 6-speed gear set back in this and put it back together. Sometimes we get lucky, but most times not. So that gasket's holding on pretty good. Let me get a dead blow and we'll give it a little persuasion. And we'll see if this works, because there we go. And we got oil going everywhere, of course. We'll pull this out of the way. Find something to catch this oil. Just gonna keep leaking, ain't it? Try to get this oil up. So this shaft pulls right out of here. This shaft holds these shifting forks in. I didn't realize I wasn't recording, so now I gotta re-show you. These shifting forks stay in there, that shaft is in there. You pull this shaft and you can pull all 3 shifting forks out of this transmission. That brings us down to this plate. This is what has this main shaft and secondary shaft on it. And when we pull this tranny out, we're gonna pull it all out together with this plate. And as we put this 6-speed back in, this is the plate. It's an Ultima 6-speed. We took it out of the transmission last week to go in this bike. This right here will go in the case. The reason this is thicker than that plate is because it houses the 6th gear in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull these starter bolts. just because that way I won't have to deal with it when I'm taking the primary off the other side. Primary's got to come off this as well. One starter bolt. There's going to be another one on the back side back here. If you can see where I'm putting that. I don't have a cameraman today to do close-ups, so trying to make sure you guys can see everything. Now, on a lot of bikes, including this one, there's going to be a main ground cable from the battery going to this bolt on the back side of this starter right back in here. So when you put this back together, make sure that ground cable's back. Otherwise, this thing's going to have a tough time starting. So we got all that done. Starter's loose. I have to take the jack shaft loose over here before we can pull the starter out of our way. And to be honest, if I can get this gear set pulled without having to move that starter, we're going to leave it right where it's at. Try to do as the least amount of work as possible. Now, starter bolts are also same as the bottom of the transmission plate, and that is 1/4. So we're going to go ahead and pull the bottom of the transmission out. That's a bracket to hold oil lines in place. And these are much shorter than the starter bolts, so it'd be hard to get these mixed up with the two starter bolts. And if you notice, this transmission plate, these two bolts right here are holding your exhaust mount on as well. Actually, all four of those bolts were. I've seen where it's only two, and usually you wind up with a strip transmission bolt. This is a better bracket, so we'll get the bracket off as well. Now we got two smaller ones right here. Now you'll notice that these bolts that went through this plate are pretty long, and they actually, some of them actually go through the plate and into the transmission. So they're not just holding that plate on, they're holding the front throw-out bearing and stuff on as well. So we got most of this disassembled on this side. Everything that's going to pretty much come out this way is out of the way. The starter's loose, top, shifting forks, rods out of the transmission. We'll be pulling this plate. I'm not even going to try to attempt to move this plate yet because the main shaft goes through, and on the other side is the belt pulley, and it's tightened down onto this shaft. So we've got to get the primary off before we can even think about getting to this belt pulley. And then I'm going to have to figure out what bearings I want to replace all that. We'll probably go ahead and do new bearings on the 5th gear on the main shaft as it goes through. This is your 5th gear out here. Now on the 6-speed, you got your 5th gear here, but you have a 6th gear that rides inside the housing right here. And you'll see all that when we put that together. This is Dave with Iron Blackbird Cycles, and we are starting on the primary side of this 6-speed, 5-speed to 6-speed conversion on this older Ultra Classic. So we got to get some stuff out of the way over here. Good old flat blade screwdriver used. We'll spread that a little bit, and look at that. I can almost pull it off with the screwdriver. I did pull it off with the screwdriver. When we pull this inner, this will stay in, and hopefully we can pull this inner primary past this without having to drop it, but we may have to drop it. Hopefully we don't even have to take this loose. The gear set should slide out without messing with any of the shifting parts. So, I guess we're down to pulling some primary stuff here. And of course we'll have to drain this thing because it's going to drop oil everywhere. Right there's a drain, looks like. Unfortunately, I can't get this out of my way because they put the bolt in on this side, which means I can't get the bolt out till we get this primary cover off. Unless I take the whole bracket off, and I really don't want to do that if I don't have to. This is all about doing this as easy as possible. Less work as possible, because work is time and time is money. So, I gotta figure out what size that drain plug is. Get a different pan that'll catch oil. And we're going to, we need a longer pan for these. And what we use are these paint pans. Go to Walmart and buy a crap ton of these. And that will almost catch a lot of the oil that's going to spill out of this when we pull it. Have more problems than he thinks he does. May have to healy coil that one back there. What I was just talking about. Doesn't look like we're going to sneak past it without having to take the whole bracket off. There we go. Maybe. Maybe. I can at least get to it where I can get it out, get the bolt out now. Hopefully you can see this. Then we pull that floorboard off, and guess what? Now we can get it off. Two hanging out in there. We're gonna drop all these primary parts. At this point, we know they all go in this primary, except for that bolt on the, for the, and we're gonna let that drip a minute, and I'm gonna find a safe place for this. So, it's gonna have to remove this clutch hub. And in there, where the throwout bearing is, there's a large snap ring. Be careful with that sucker, because it will fly. Set that over here, because it's gonna go in with the primary stuff. Now, this just pulls out. That's the other end of your throwout bearing. Now, still inside here is a rod that meets those two things. And when you pull that clutch, it pushes this out. When it pushes this out, it releases the clutches. So we're gonna take this jack shaft bolt out. You're gonna take a screwdriver, flatten that tab back out. Be careful, those will break, and then you have to replace that part. If you break that tab every time you go to start this, it'll just spin this bolt right out. So you have to have this in good shape. I am not gonna lie, I just turned this thing before I turned the camera on, and it was loose. So that'll tell you how good that keeper does. This was loose. This is supposed to be torqued, so good thing we had to tear into this thing, because I don't know how much longer this would have made it. But that is your screw that holds your jack shaft in. Now, might have to wiggle this around a little bit to get those gears to match up, and then you can pull this out. Inside here is a spring. Let me grab a pick so I can pull that spring out and show you that spring. So here's the spring that sets up inside that. And it has to go on this side. Inside here is a snap ring. Inside this bushing is a snap ring. On that snap ring is where this spring rides. Now, we can't pull that bushing until we pull the clutch hub. So we're just gonna leave that tucked back up in there. We're gonna put this spring where all the other primary stuff is. And we're gonna start on some of these other bolts. We're gonna bend some of these other tabs back. Hopefully that floorboard's not in your way. Tabs are kind of self-explanatory. You see them bent over, you're gonna have to put them back. Now these are going to be 7/16. Probably going to get a socket so I can quit cutting my hand on the clutch basket. And we're going to take the two bolts, the keeper with the tabs on, and the two washers out. And those will go in the primary over there so we don't lose those. And there's the shoe. That could probably use another shoe. We'll have to check that out. I'm not going to bother with loosen this bolts into the primer itself, doesn't bolt into anything else. Considering where this is at, it's going to stay out of my way. So what we're going to do is attack this clutch hub. Now these clutch hubs are right-hand thread. If you tighten this, if you try to loosen this, all you're doing is tightening it. So you need to make sure that you reverse your impact or whatever you're using to pull this with. Make sure to reverse it from what you would normally do, because it's got to come off the other direction. Well, we got a brand new Milwaukee. It's the first time I've ever used it. It's just been sitting over there charged up, waiting on me to use it. So that would be tightening, which would be loosening this nut. Let me say something about these big Milwaukees. I have busted clutch hubs on older bikes with a tapered shaft, because if you tighten them down too much, you will drive this clutch hub on that tapered shaft until you crack the whole hub, and then you're fixing the hub. Okay. And this is typical of what I see of these older bikes. This clutch hub was probably loose because this isn't wanting to come out. And there's a washer that sets behind this thing. And it is actually come apart inside that clutch hub. So let's see if we can get that out of there. See if I find a big enough screwdriver. Because I can see that's messed up in there. Which means we're going to have to order a piece for this clutch hub. Man, this stuff's been run hard. This is what I'm talking about. That keeper is supposed to be stuck in there holding this in. What's happened is, over the years, this has wallered this washer out and come through the washer. That should be setting on the washer, but you can see where it's cut this washer. So that all is going to have to be repaired. So, like I expected, to get to this nut, we're gonna have to get this floorboard out of the way. So I'm gonna come down here, and I'm going underneath this, right into the bolt that's holding this floorboard. And guess what? It's got a nut on the back side of it that's turning. Let's hope we can get in there on it without too much trouble. It's worth the time to just pull this floorboard off the mount. Probably. So we're gonna try to just get the floorboard out of the way, see if that'll give us enough room to pull that. If nothing else, it'll at least give us more room to get to the floorboard mount. These are 7/16 each end. Got a nylon locker nut on it. So it's gonna be a pain in the butt all the way out. You just can't spin it out, you know. And you'll know these bolts because they're shanked. You can spot that shank on them. And it's good practice to put the nuts back on so you can find them. Now we can get that floorboard out of the way. We might, yep, we can get it, just barely get on it. Now, unlike the clutch hub nut, this is the same as any other bolt. So reverse your impact back. Oh. Now, I've had this socket, it's 1.5 inches. I've had this thing for about 20 years. This is the only socket you're gonna find to fit these older nuts with. So we're gonna pull all this stuff out, get it out of the way. And yeah, I'm liking the new impact. So now, sometimes these clutch hubs come right off. Other times we gotta put a puller on. What I'm trying to do is break it loose. There we go. I think I felt it move. No, I didn't, which is not good either. So, we may have to put a puller in here. So let me explain what's going on. Normally this hub should pull right off 5th gear. And it was stuck. And I mean stuck. I've had to push this shaft so hard with the puller to get this unstuck that the gear set is already coming out the other side. So chances are, once I get this out of the way, I may be able to just pull that gear set out the other side. Now, I don't like to do it that way because there's bushing on this shaft right here. Let me get this out of the way. There's bushing on this shaft. It takes a special tool. Once we get this out of the way, to pull that off that shaft. And what I've virtually been doing was using the gear puller. This is the wrong way to do it. I didn't like to do it that way, but it was already moving, so I had to. But it was moving that bushing, which holds the main shaft in. So I'm gonna see if the main shaft and the gear set will pull out and just be out of the way at this point. But I don't think they will. Now, well, I'll take that back. To answer your question, there's the 5-speed gear set without the bushing. That bushing goes right here on this shaft. And by pushing it through there, it's pushed that bushing. Which puts undue amount of stress on the bearings, but we're changing the bearings anyway, so kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone there. And as we can see, that bushing is right there. So there's the bushing that should have stayed on that shaft. We would have had to pull this after we pulled this, but now we don't have to go to that trouble. So that's definitely a plus. Sorry about the bad camera angle there for a little bit, but we are plugging along single-handed today, so well, that one broke, so it's a good thing that we have more of those. What we're doing is we're bending the tabs away from these inner primary bolts. This back one's not going to be fun because I got the tabs in the damn hole with the bolt. That's not where they belong. You gotta love working on other people's problems. There's another one. These were all about to go. And if those go while you're running down the road, they're gonna make a mess out of stuff. So let's see how many of these I can get out before we run into problems. Working on other people's problems. Let me explain something. It's like marrying somebody's ex. You're just working with somebody else's problems. Are we missing a tab on that one? Yep, sure are. I'm gonna tell you, I don't know how they got that one tightened down. Unless that keeper's twisted on. And they didn't get it tight enough. I don't know what the deal is, but that keeper is in a bad spot to try to get that bolt out. You should find between 7 and 8 bolts depending on which primary you're taking off. These have 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Softail primaries have 8. A lot of them, the older ones. The newer ones, I don't think they do. I think the newer ones are 7 as well. I'm gonna have to put a knuckle on that one. Probably so. Let's see how much we gotta fight this one. This is gonna be crazy. I do not know why someone did that. This doesn't make any sense, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I see a lot of stuff people do that I would like to hang them for. Oh, man. I guarantee you it won't go back this way. So, like I said, because they put that keeper in there, this bolt wasn't even tight. When they got that keeper stuck in there, you couldn't get a socket on that bolt. Luckily, I'd get enough just to start turning it. This is what I'm talking about, these ears. They had these ears up against the side of this primary where you couldn't pry them out. So, not fun. Not fun, people. Try to do what you gotta do. Just don't bring it to me after you're done doing stupid shit. And some of these older bikes had a couple of bolts down here underneath on the back side of the frame going into the back side of these primaries. So if this thing just doesn't pop right off, we are in for a good one. And you know, here's the ironic thing. This is one that it only has 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts in the primary. which means, no. I'm thinking we got a bolt down here somewhere. Yep. And man, is it hid. Oh man. Because we ever put this primary back together, didn't tighten this bolt back up. So, that bolt goes in the back side down here, right down there. And then we're gonna get our special socket for this. This is a special socket. Usually there's a shaft sticking out here. That's what this socket's for, to do that shaft. This is also gonna be right-handed thread. Shaft, or 5th gear actually. Now, same as the other transmission. One of these. Now we've got to push this. Normally we would press this. Deal is, it's the same gear that's in the other tranny. So we're gonna leave this gear here and we're gonna pop the new tranny back in and use this gear in this tranny. Now this is the 6-speed. This is the 5-speed gear that's still in the case, pressed into that bushing. So we took it off. Now we can slide this 6-speed right into place because that gear is the same as what was on this gear set. Because all this gear set is another 5-speed. We gotta get that secondary in. Now look at that. Drops right in. So stay tuned for tomorrow, because I'm done for the day. But this is going back onto this case. We will put the shifting forks back in from its shifting forks, because it has an extra 2 forks that are different from the stock forks. So we're going to put those back in, and we'll put the barrel back on, put this tranny back together, and we can start putting this bike back together. So tune in tomorrow or the next day, and we should have video of it up. Doing the finishing touches on this thing. But this is how you convert a 5-speed to a 6-speed in an older Ultra, or anything, to be honest. You can even do this in a softail. Like I said, this 6-speed gear set came out of a softail, and it slides right in. And all the gears are meshing. All we got to do is put the shifting forks back in, tighten everything back up. We're good to go. So y'all, be sure and like and subscribe, and share us to all your buddies. And hang out with us whenever we're building something. And we'll get back on the shovelhead project tomorrow as well. So this is Dave from Blackbird Cycles.